Well, you know, it was in March
Okay.
of '96. As a matter of
96.
Okay.
fact, it was March 17th of '96, and I was a part of a ministry. It was called Praise Assembly Full Gospel Ministries, and at the time it was Pastor Fanny Wallace. Now she's Apostle Fanny Wallace there in Oklahoma City, and it was on 15th Street, and we were doing a conference.
Hmm.
So Thea had come down for the conference, but probably about 6 months prior to that, um, when I started going to the ministry, I was probably about 22. And so I said that I just wanted a relationship with God at that moment. And I
Hmm.
didn't really want a relationship with a female for that time period. And so after being there for a couple of years, I said, okay, God, hey, ready now, So there was this young lady that I was interested in, right? And so we went out once, and we wasn't a couple, wasn't a thing or anything, but we did go out. We went to eat, and that was about it. So we were at a choir rehearsal, and there was a prophetess there, and praise and worship just really got high. And at one point, the prophetess, she just started prophesying.
Mm.
So she looks at me and she says, "This is not your wife." Now, nobody knew that, we had, kind of went out.
Hmm.
Uh, she says, "This is not your wife." She looks at her and say, "This is not your husband." And
Ooh.
Wow.
I'm feeling a certain type of way, right? So I'm
Yeah.
Yeah.
so upset. I'm like, "What? How dare
Point me
you?"
out.
Yeah. So she said, "When you see your wife," she said, "when you see your wife for the first time, you will know that that's your wife." And
Woo.
I'm like, okay, God, right, go.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Sure.
I'm in my feelings a little bit because I was really digging the young lady,
Uh-huh.
and I felt she was digging me a little bit. And so, coincidentally, she ended up leaving, not because of that, but some other stuff had, kind of happened in her life, and she ended up leaving.
Mm.
And okay, I said, okay, hey, well, we just gonna keep doing what we're doing. We're just gonna keep serving God in the capacity that we are, you know. And so now moving forward to this conference on the 17th of March of '96. And I am conference is kind of like in full spring swing. It is the first night that
Hmm.
everybody has come together. Of course, I did not know Thea. She flew in from Corpus Christi. I didn't know her or where she had flew in from at that time.
Hmm.
So I'm on the drums. Praise and worship has started. I'm playing the drums, and I happened to look up, and we made eye contact.
Yeah.
And immediately I heard an audible voice.
Mm.
That's my wife. And I messed
Whoa.
all up on the drums. I messed all up on the drums. I'm everywhere because now I'm in my head and I'm like, oh my God, what's going on?
Yeah.
And Pastor Fanny, she looks at me like, oh, Deez, what you doing? And I'm like, okay, okay.
Yeah.
So we finish the service.
So let me start back to me being in Corpus Christi and how I ended up there.
Okay. Yes.
So my mother was Dorothy Benson Brown. She passed in 2018, and she was the sister of Fanny Wallace. And she would go
Okay.
every year to visit her church. It was fairly new at that time, but she was a great supporter. So
Hmm.
this particular women's conference that March of 96, I volunteered to go. I said, well, let me go and check it out. It'd be good to see family and see what
Hmm.
Fanny's church is all about. So we get there that night, first night of the conference, and I was on the first row or second row?
Second.
Second row.
Mm.
Mm.
And I sit down, like he said, praise and worship was already pretty high in full swing. And like he said, I looked to the drummer, this guy here, We made eye contact. I audibly heard
Ugh.
the word of God say, "That is your husband."
Wow.
So you
Wow,
heard
y'all
it
on the same
too?
accord.
He heard it. I didn't know. He didn't know.
Yeah.
We kept it to ourselves. But after that service,
So after the service, right? I got goosebumps all over again. So after the service, I'm trying to figure out, okay, what's gonna happen from here. So I walks.
because I was living in Corpus Christi.
Yeah.
At the time, I was in my very, very first year of teaching. I was teaching
Okay.
here at Miller High School. I had also moved into my very first apartment. My
Mm.
mother gave me the ultimatum at the age of 25 that if you're not going on to something else, then bye-bye. So I was out in my first apartment, first job, and here I am. Okay, this is your husband. How is this going to work out?
Yeah.
And so I walk up to her. It was this now. This is after church. Everybody is kind of congregating and talking amongst themselves and having a good time. So I walk to. She was with one of her cousins,
Mhm.
and they were looking at pictures in her
This is
wallet.
back when you had wallet.
Yeah.
I missed those.
Yeah. No phone. So she's looking at pictures, and all of a sudden, I kind of glance at the photo, and it kind of looked like her, and I'm like, okay, man, she got kids. And I said,
Yeah.
hey, that's your. I said, that's your kid. She says, no. I said, okay, all right. So
Amen.
she kept flipping. Now this is a little boy. I'm like, man, this little dude look like her too. And so I say, hey, is that one yours? She says, no, that was not mine either. Now, again, we still haven't really said my name is.
Yeah,
yet.
yeah.
I'm just kind of,
Small talk.
I'm just
Yeah.
over there talking.
Yeah.
So at that point, I said, hey, you're enjoying service? She says, yes, I'm enjoying service. And man, that guy was nowhere to be found. I run down to the restroom. I left, went to the restroom, got in the mirror, like, man, what you doing? What you doing, dude?
Yeah.
I tried to conjure back this old dude that knew how to talk, right?
Trying to be a match.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm like that dude. It was like the Hulk when the guy said, "Hey, come out." The Hulk said, "No, ain't
Yeah.
Yeah.
this dude was nowhere to be found." So I said, "Okay, God, if she's my wife, then you got to give me a sign. You got to show me something."
Yeah.
Now we knew each other's name at that point.
Okay.
We had said hello, but we didn't I didn't go back up and we start conversation.
Mhm.
So the next morning, that was the first night session, and
Yeah.
then we had a morning session because it's a conference. So that morning, I'm kind of straightening up chairs. In walks this older lady behind me, and everybody is just trying to, kind of coming into the sanctuary talking. And she tapped me on the shoulder. She said, "How you doing, young man?" I say, I'm doing well. How are you?" She says, "I'm doing good." She says, "Have you met my daughter?"
Mm.
And I said, "No, ma'am, I don't know you.
Yeah.
Who's your daughter?" And she says, she looks up and she saw Thea on the other side of the room. She says, "That young lady right over there." And I say, "Oh, yes, ma'am. I met her last night." She patted me on the back and said, "You take good care of her now," and walked off.
Oh my gosh.
That's your
Walked off.
sign.
Walked
Oh
off.
my
I
gosh.
said, "Okay, God." I walked back down to the restroom. I said, "God, that's good. That's good, God. That's good." I say, "But you got to give me another one."
You weren't trying to listen, huh?
Yeah. So at this point, service is in full swing. I go down to the restroom because I had to use the restroom. So I went to the restroom this time just to use the restroom. When I came back up, somebody said, Thea, they was clapping and hoorahing because Thea had joined church.
This had to be the Sunday.
Yes.
During that Sunday.
Yes.
Yeah. So she opened
What?
the altar.
Yeah.
Said this has been an awesome weekend. For those of you, anyone wanting to make a transfer, wanting a strong
Mhm.
relationship with Christ. And I was at a point in my life, I was just kind of seeking direction.
Yeah.
I was a young woman on my own, independent, and I just felt a stirring in my spirit from this conference on top of what God had told me. But I
Mhm.
really wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking about what I needed spiritually.
Mhm.
So I just stepped out on faith. I went to the altar. My cousin came up, or was that afterward? And then Odise. And that's when he got the word and heard the stirring that, you know, Thea's gonna join. Thea's gonna move here to Oklahoma. Because that's
Oh
when
my
total
gosh.
transfer.
So again, now we're not letting each other know anything because
Yeah,
I
yeah.
know
Still didn't
I'm
know.
I'm just saying. I say, okay, God. I went back to the restroom, self-talk in the
Gotta
mirror.
go back to the restroom, man.
I said, okay, God. All right, she moved here. I say, God, people do that all the time. People do that all the time. They go in church
Oh, I
one
hate it.
Sunday,
No,
they
they
don't come back. I say they do that. I say, God, and I know you will be moving to Corpus Christi. I say people do it all the time. So that
Going to the airport.
this was that Monday. So we were supposed to go. They after church that evening, because at that time we were still doing 2 services. So after church that evening, everybody said, okay, hey, we're gonna go to pizza place. So everybody went, I think it was like Pizza Hut.
Okay.
Went to Pizza Hut. I end up sitting across the table from her. And it still was really just small talk. It
Yeah.
wasn't anything other than that. And there was a young lady that was in our ministry that knew the young lady that I was interested in 6 months prior.
Okay.
So she said, "Oh, Dee," she says, "So has a letter she gave me to give to you." I said, "No."
No. That letter ain't for me.
That ain't
I said,
mine.
"No,
Wrong.
no.
You got the
I
wrong
don't want to
one.
know. I don't want to know nothing about the letter." No, that's okay. And she said, "What'd you say, babe?"
I want to see the letter.
But
Open this letter.
so I said, no, it was just somebody I was interested in long. I had to put
Yeah,
the
yeah.
on there. Long
It's in my past
time
life.
ago.
No, just 6 months prior.
Right,
So-
right.
So at this point, dinner's over. Folks are getting ready to go, but they're getting ready to go back to Corpus Christi the next morning. So we walk outside, you know, we kind of walk into the car together, and I asked her for a number. So
Okay.
she gave me a number, and she said, "Can I have yours?" And I said, "No, you can't have my number." Yeah, that face you just did.
Yeah.
It was that face. And I said, "If I'm interested, I'll call." Right. And I did this simply because I didn't want to be pursued. I wanted to be the pursuer.
Okay.
Gotcha.
I respect
And-
that.
And so at that moment, you know, we exchanged numbers. You know, I get home, and so we didn't talk that quick because she went to the airport that next day.
Yes, and that's when and Fanny and I were kind of having small talk as we were getting ready to get in the car.
Mhm.
And she's like, my nickname is Buffy, not and she said something like, Buffy, I cannot believe you're moving to Oklahoma City. And she said, what she asked me?
Oh,
Why are you, on top of spiritually? And I
Yeah.
said something like to marry ODs. And that was the first time it had come out of my mouth.
Oh.
She was totally shocked.
Mhm.
But the Holy Spirit had already shown her that's what it was.
Mm.
I was standing at the altar in front of her. My cousin, my closest cousin, was standing next to me, and Odise had come up immediately after. So God had already shown her in a vision
Yeah.
that we were husband and wife. So when that came out of my mouth, it really confirmed something to her. But she was still shocked and surprised that I knew.
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
something within me, said
Right.
it as well.
So that was a Monday. That was that Monday.
Uh-huh.
And so now we was back at church that Tuesday because in those days we was at church every day. We was a new church starting, so we had something going every
Mhm.
day. Her grandmother was there. Now, and really I really didn't know necessarily at the time until the conference that, her mom and Apostle Pastor Fanny was sisters.
Okay.
And so her grandmother was there, and her grandmother, we call her Granny. So, well, that night I had called. I tried to call her phone before church. I tried to call her phone. Got the old dun 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 dun. The old busy.
Yeah.
You have reached the number that is disconnected.
Oh.
No
I
longer in
said,
service.
I got the old,
Yeah.
I got the old slip
Yeah,
number.
she gave you the fake one.
Yeah, she gave me the fake. I said, golly. I said, okay. I said, God, I don't know. All right.
It was a real number. I was living with a roommate at the time, and he had run the phone bill up.
Oh.
Got shut off.
So now church. So I'm at church, and her grandmother, now I don't know. Her grandmother
Granny.
says to me, she says, DC. That's what she called me. She say, DC. I say, yes, ma'am. Hey, Granny. She says, have you talked to Buff? I'm like, do everybody know something we don't know?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So she said, have you talked to Buff? I said, no, ma'am. So Pastor Fanny happened to be standing at the altar, and she was, fixing her mic and stuff.
Mhm.
And she looked up and she says, Fanny. And she looked at her mom. And she says, call your sister to tell her daughter to get her phone on. That boy trying to call her. And I'm like, wow. So Wednesday night, we back at church again. And she say, DC, I say, yes, ma'am. You can call her now, her phone on.
Hey. And y'all, they was gonna make sure it happened.
That was Granny intervening.
So I call, and by this time we're on the phone for about like 5 minutes, just kind of chatting. And I said, wait a minute, hold on. I said, I have a question. And I said, when we first met, not talking, but when we first laid eyes, you first saw me for the first time, what went through your mind? Is there anything, is there a word or something that went through your mind? Because it's crazy for somebody to just walk up to somebody you don't know. Hey, God told me you my wife.
Yeah.
And so she says, no, I have word, but I can't say that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I can't say that.
I wouldn't either.
And I'm like, and I'm trying not to say it. I'm like, no, I can't say it either. I said, well,
could be two different words.
Yeah.
Right.
I said, well, God told me that you was my wife.
Mm.
And then it was immediate. It wasn't like a silence, like, okay, brother, click.
Mhm.
It was God told.
I remember saying it was the word marriage. It was the word marriage. That word came out, and I said, and he said that you're my husband.
Yeah. And that we were husband and wife. I dropped the phone, man.
That was the first time we had revealed it to each other.
Wow.
It's on the floor for about 5 minutes. I'm just looking at it, right?
Yeah.
Armpits. We had them little prickly armpits.
Yeah.
It was like it hit. It's like, oh, I finally got it out.
Yeah.
He confirmed it.